The card was still on the kitchen table when I got home from the hardware store that Saturday afternoon. My daughter had left it propped against the fruit bowl, the envelope already opened. She'd handed it to me herself, watched me read it, then kissed my cheek and said she had to get going because Philip's parents were having people over. I stood there holding a birthday card with a cartoon beaver wearing a party hat. Inside, in her handwriting, "Happy birthday, Dad. Hope your day is great. Love always." And tucked behind it a Tim Hortons gift card. $20. I didn't count the candles on the cake she hadn't baked. I didn't make a list of all the ways I'd imagined turning 63 might feel. I just set the card back against the fruit bowl and put the kettle on. My name is Arthur Pemberton. I'm 64 now, retired from 31 years as a site supervisor for a civil engineering firm out of London, Ontario. My wife passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. My daughter Naomi was 26 when we lost her mother. She cried for 3 days straight, and I held her through most of it. And I remember thinking, at least I still have her. At least I didn't lose them both. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest of this. Naomi is my only child. I am not a man who says I love you easily. My own father never said it to me once, but I have always shown up. When she was in university at Western, I drove 4 hours round trip twice a month so she wouldn't feel alone. When she met Philip at 28, and they got engaged inside of 14 months, I smiled at the rehearsal dinner even though I barely knew the man. When they needed a down payment for their first place in Oakville, I wired $43,000 from the RRSP I'd been building since she was in diapers. No loan agreement. No interest. Just a check and a handshake and her arms around my neck. I'm telling you this not to make myself sound generous. I'm telling you because I need you to understand the kind of father I was trying to be, so that what comes next makes a different kind of sense. Last June, Philip's father turned 65. His name is Roger. I've met him maybe 7 times at family dinners. He's pleasant enough, works in commercial real estate, drives a white Lexus, and has never once asked me a single question about my life. At Naomi and Philip's wedding, he gave a 20-minute toast about his son and mentioned my late wife exactly once, briefly in passing. But this birthday, Roger was turning 65. A milestone. Naomi had been talking about it for weeks, how they were planning something special, how Philip's whole family was flying in from Vancouver, how it was going to be a big dinner at a restaurant in Mississauga. I thought nothing of it. I was happy she was close with her in-laws. Her mother and I had always wanted that for her. My birthday fell 2 weeks before Roger's. I turned 63 on a Thursday. Naomi came by on the Saturday, gave me the Beaver card and the Tim Hortons gift card, stayed 45 minutes, and drove back to Oakville. I had leftover chicken soup for dinner and watched the Blue Jays lose to Boston. I want to be honest, I wasn't devastated that day. I was used to things being quieter since her mother died. I told myself that's just what happens when your kids grow up and build lives of their own. I had a friend from work named Barry who was going through something similar with his boys, and we'd joke about it sometimes over a beer at the Legion. "Welcome to invisibility," he'd say. "The cloak kicks in the second they get a mortgage." So I let it go. Then, the week after Roger's birthday dinner, Naomi called me to tell me how wonderful the evening had been. I was happy to hear her happy. I asked what they'd done for him. She went quiet for just half a second, the kind of pause that means someone is deciding how to answer. "We got him a watch," she said. "That's nice," I said. "What kind?" Another pause. "A Rolex." I don't know why I asked the next question. Maybe something in my chest already knew. "How much was it?" "Dad, it's not." "Naomi, how much?" $11,000, she said. "But Philip contributed too. It was both of us." I set my coffee mug down on the counter very carefully. Did Philip contribute his half? The silence that followed was about 4 seconds long. 4 seconds is a very long time when you already know the answer. "We used the joint account," she said finally. "The one you set up for us when we bought the condo." I had set up that account. After they bought the Oakville place, I'd opened a joint account with Naomi. Not with Philip, with Naomi, and I transferred money into it periodically to help with property taxes and maintenance, the kinds of costs that sneak up on you in your first home. I put in $22,000 over 2 years. My name was still on the account. I checked the balance online occasionally the way you check on a garden, not micromanaging, just making sure things were growing right. I hadn't checked in about 4 months. That afternoon I logged in. The balance was $912. There had been a withdrawal of $11,200 in the third week of May. The memo line said, Burks, watch purchase. There was also a withdrawal of $1,800 in April. The memo line on that one said, Roger's 65th dinner deposit. So it wasn't just a watch. It was the restaurant, too. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that. The refrigerator hummed. A crow landed on the fence in the backyard and looked at me through the window, then flew off. I thought about the beaver card on the table. I thought about $43,000 and 11 weeks and a woman who deserved better than to die at 58. I didn't call Naomi back that night. I needed to think. I have a neighbor named Clifford, retired Crown attorney, sharp as a tack, tends his roses like their family. We've had a standing Saturday morning coffee routine for 6 years. That Saturday, I walked over at 9 and told him what had happened. He listened without interrupting, which is a skill most people never develop. When I finished, he set down his mug and said, Arthur, that account has your name on it. I know. That's not her money to spend. I know that too. Have you talked to a lawyer? I hadn't, but Clifford had kept his license current. He made some calls and got me a referral to a woman in Hamilton who handled family estate matters. Not because it was an estate issue, but because she understood exactly how money moved between parents and adult children and what recourse looked like when it moved the wrong way. Her name was Susan Cho, and when I met with her the following Tuesday, she spent 20 minutes reading through the account documents I printed and then looked up at me and said, You have standing here. This was a joint account with funds you contributed. There's no gift agreement, no signed document releasing your interest. This is recoverable. I asked her what my options were. She said, You write a formal demand letter. You give them 30 days to return the funds. If they don't, you file in small claims. Though the amount is at the high end, we may need to go to Superior Court for the full sum. Either way, the paper trail is clean. I told her to draft the letter. 3 days after it was delivered to Naomi's address by registered mail, my phone started ringing. The first call came at 7:45 in the morning. I was still in my housecoat. I let it go to voicemail. The message was Naomi, her voice tight and careful. Dad, we need to talk. Please call me back. I didn't call back that day. By the end of the week, she had called 19 times. I know because I counted. 19 calls over 6 days. A few I answered briefly, just long enough to say I was waiting for her to respond to the letter through proper channels. Each time she tried to pull me into a conversation, I said the same thing. Naomi, I have a lawyer now. Please talk to Susan. That made things worse before they got better. Philip called twice. His voice was different from hers. Not tight, but flat, controlled. He said they felt blindsided, that they hadn't realized I considered that money separate from what I'd gifted them over the years. I told him calmly that I'd never used the word gift in relation to that account, that the account existed to cover shared property costs, and that $11,000 on a Rolex for his father was not a shared property cost. He didn't have much to say to that. Then came the call I hadn't expected. About 2 weeks in, Naomi left a voicemail that wasn't tight or careful anymore. She was crying. She said she hadn't meant to hurt me. She said the birthday dinner had gotten bigger than planned and they'd been short on cash that month, and she'd actually thought that I wouldn't mind because I'd always been so generous. She said she should have asked. She said she was sorry. I listened to that message 3 times. The third time I noticed she said she was sorry she hadn't asked. Not sorry she'd done it. Not sorry she'd chosen a Rolex for Roger and a Tim Hortons card for me. Sorry she hadn't looped me in on the decision. There's a difference. It's a significant difference. My sister Beverly called me from Thunder Bay around that time. She's 71 and has a way of cutting to the thing without any preamble. She said, Arthur, you raised that girl alone for 8 years, and you've given her everything you had. If she can't see what she did, that's not a you problem. Then she told me to stop sleeping with the TV on and to eat a proper breakfast and hung up. I love Beverly. The 30-day window on the demand letter came and went. There was no payment. Susan filed. We went to Superior Court in Hamilton. The process took about 4 months in total. Not because it was complicated, but because these things move at their own pace. And Philip hired a lawyer who tried to argue that the money in the account had been effectively gifted to Naomi over time, and that any withdrawal was within her rights as a joint account holder. Susan dismantled that argument in about 20 minutes with the account statements and my testimony. The judge noted that a joint account does not transform contributed funds into a gift absent clear documentation, and that the purpose of the account, property maintenance for a specific address, was evident from the transaction history. They were ordered to repay $9,420. That accounted for the watch withdrawal, minus a portion the court determined Naomi had legitimate co-ownership claim to based on a few earlier deposits she'd made herself. The restaurant deposit was included in full. Philip paid within 2 weeks of the ruling. No note, no call. Just an e-transfer that arrived on a Wednesday evening while I was watching the news. Naomi called the following Sunday. I answered this time. She asked we could meet for coffee. I said yes. We met at a Tim Hortons, not the one on the gift card, a different one, and sat across from each other in a booth by the window. She looked tired. I probably did too. She said she'd thought a lot about what she'd done. She said she'd been taking therapy since August, and that her therapist had helped her see that she'd been treating me like a resource rather than a person. She used those words, a resource rather than a person. I don't know if she came up with that herself or if the therapist did, but it landed correctly. That's exactly what it had felt like I was a line item, a fund to draw on when needs arose. I didn't tell her how much the birthday card had hurt. I didn't bring up the beaver. But I did tell her that I had spent a lot of years trying to be the kind of father who showed up, and that showing up goes both ways eventually. That you can't spend 20 years pouring into someone and then wonder why you feel empty when they look straight through you. She cried a little, not dramatically, just quietly, the way you cry when something is actually true. I didn't cry. I'm not built that way. But I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, and I kept it there for a minute. We're not where we were. I don't know if we'll get back there. I removed my name from any remaining shared accounts, and I've been more deliberate about what I offer and what I hold back, not out of punishment, but out of self-preservation. There's a difference there, too. What I keep coming back to, in the quiet evenings in my kitchen in London, with the refrigerator humming and the jays on in the background, is this. I was so afraid of becoming my own father, cold, withholding, impossible to reach, that I swung the other way entirely. I gave without being asked. I gave before she knew she needed it. And somewhere in all that giving, I made it easy for her to stop seeing the giver. I'm not sure how you thread that needle. I'm not sure any parent figures it out cleanly. But I do know that I deserve better than a $20 Tim Hortons card and 45 minutes on a Thursday birthday. And knowing that, actually knowing it, not just suspecting it, turns out to be its own kind of gift. I think about the joint account a lot. Not the money itself, but what it represented. I'd opened it without being asked. I'd funded it without conditions. I told myself, that's what good fathers do. They build safety nets and don't make a fuss about it. What I didn't see, not for a long time, is that I'd also built something else without meaning to. I built a habit in my daughter of reaching without looking. When the account was always full, she stopped noticing who was filling it. That's not blame. That's just cause and effect, the kind that plays out slowly in families over years until something breaks the surface and you finally have to look at it clearly. What I've come to understand is that doing right by your children, really doing right by them, isn't only about generosity, it's about honesty too. The moral part isn't just in the giving. It's in the conversations you don't avoid, the expectations you actually say out loud, the moments when you tell someone the truth about how their actions land instead of quietly absorbing the hurt and calling that strength. I swallowed a lot of things I should have said. I told myself I was being the bigger person. Looking back, I was just being unclear. And Naomi, I believe she genuinely didn't understand what she'd done wrong. Not at first. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. She wasn't calculating. She just stopped thinking about it at all. The way you stop thinking about a tap that's always running. The real harm wasn't the watch or the restaurant deposit. It was what had gone unexamined for years on both sides. When I finally pushed back, when I went to Susan, filed the paperwork, held the line through 19 phone calls, I wasn't doing it out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I was doing it because something in me knew that absorbing it quietly one more time would cost more than the money. It would cost whatever was left of the honest relationship between us. The harder thing, the thing that actually required something from me, was not letting it go. It was staying in it. Staying firm without going cold. That's not easy for a man my age who was raised to keep things to himself and get on with it. I'm not a therapist. I don't have a framework for this. But I know that Naomi sitting across from me in that Tim Hortons booth, tired and trying, using words like resource rather than a person that only happened because I didn't back down. Growth, hers and mine both, came out of discomfort that neither of us chose but both of us had to move through. If I have anything to say to another father in a similar spot, it's this. The instinct to protect your child from consequences is deep and old, and not entirely wrong. But there's a point where protecting them from consequences means protecting them from understanding. And a person who never has to reckon with what they've done doesn't get the chance to become someone better. I still have that birthday card in a kitchen drawer. The beaver with the party hat. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it's the most honest document in this whole story. $20.45, right there in my hand, and I almost talked myself into being fine with it. I'm glad I didn't.